All right, so welcome to the end of year training for special ed data and reporting. This is the beginner session, but that doesn't mean you have to be a beginner to be in here because I'm doing 2 trainings and sometimes one time is better than another. So, but I want to stress that as we go along, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand by clicking this little guy here. Can you see? No, I'm not sharing my screen. Oh, I can't show it to you. You can raise your hand up at the top on the right. There's a little raise hand button. There it is. So you can click this and I can call on you. Or you can, if you're afraid to ask anything during the training, which you don't need to be afraid, probably somebody else has the same question you do, feel free to email me afterwards. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is for the spring of 2023, and yes, I did get this started late. I apologize for the lateness of this. We've had some things going on in the office that have kind of made it difficult to stay on top of our regular work. So I am Amy Patterson. Yeah, my name is Amy Patterson. I am the Special Ed Data Manager at KDE. And if you don't know me, you will, because I send out emails, and usually starting about this time of year, I send out a ton of emails, like all the time. So getting ready for the upcoming reporting. So today we're going to talk about reporting, and then at the end of this, we are going to talk about the new look for special education forms, which is coming out in June, next month. So that's what we're talking about. Just to remind you, we have some resources available for you that you may or may not know about. I just want to share this information just for if you're not aware. We have data standards, and I sent this out. I think the links work when you convert it to a PowerPoint, to a PDF. If not, I can send those to you. But so we have data standards for anything in Infinite Campus that you do. So if you have a question about how to enroll a student or about how to transfer a record, that information is available in a data standard. If you have a question about discipline, that information is in data standards. And then specifically, we have special education data standards, which are, we actually have 6 of them, I think, one for each special education document. And then there's also a processes one. And we are going to be updating these data standards. They just got updated, I think, or they're going to be this week. But then they'll also be updated again in a month with the new screenshots and the new information for the new look that's coming up that we'll talk about at the end. So if you ever have questions about how to enter something in Infinite Campus, check out these data standards. And then, of course, if there's something not clear, or if you have suggestions about what I could add to make it better, I'm always open to that as well. Just email me and let me know. We also have a special education reporting manual. Thank you, Tracy. We have a special education reporting manual that is new, that has information about all special education reporting. So it starts with child count and it goes throughout the school year. So this is available for you guys as well, and that will be updated annually. It's really hard, to be honest, to keep that updated because it does change from year to year based on changes in Infinite Campus, based on improving data collections, those sorts of things. Again, I'm open to feedback on those. If there's something that you might want to, you might want to see in there that you don't see, feel free to email me and say, hey, it would be nice if we have this. I'll do my best to make it happen. I can't always do that because sometimes it's difficult, but I'm open to any ideas. So these are just some reminders about items that are available to you to help you as you're working through data. I especially recommend this for any new people or relatively new people. Other resources that we have a dashboard page on our website. This dashboard page actually also includes, we have a special education child count dashboard that has child count information. You can break it out by district, CERTAC, RTC, demographic, all kinds of different ways, state, and that's available for we have data from the last 4 years. We also have another dashboard that has indicator data in it. And we don't have all indicator data in that yet, but I am happy to announce that we have a new data analyst starting here in about 3 weeks. And so we're really hoping to make a lot of progress on that here pretty soon. So those are 2 dashboards that we have available to us. Also on that page is we have what's called fast facts. OSEP puts out every once in a while fast facts about a certain category. One was about EL students and special ed. There was another one about traumatic brain injury. I don't know if that one's been released yet, but when they do that, we do the same thing with Kentucky data. So we spotlight certain areas in Kentucky data as well. So all those are visualizations that are available on this page. We have our public reporting page that has our state performance plan annual performance report, which is the report that we have to submit annually to the federal government. And then it has indicator data broken out, indicators that are part of that state performance plan annual performance report that are broken out by district. And it has some other data around child count and educational environments and some other things. And then we have our special education resources for using Infinite Campus. This is just sort of just a bunch of resources that can help you. That's where I'm going to be putting the link to this video and the PowerPoint and all those sorts of things. And for those of you who didn't get my email, Tracy put the end of year PowerPoint in the chat. Let's dive into reporting. So these are the submission dates. So the most upcoming due date is personnel data. Now I sent you an email with a spreadsheet back in December. Probably I sent it in November. So you could record personnel data. It asks specific questions. I'm going to show you more information about that. But I sent that to you back in November or December so that you could record that data. And you're actually going to put that in GMAP when you submit your application for IDEA. So that's going to go in, and that's due June 1st. But remember, it's as of December 1st, so you still have that data. You should have that data in that PowerPoint. June 30th, we have indicators 11, 12, and 13. I sent a spreadsheet for 11 and 13 And then indicator 12 was a link to a survey. And then our preschool coordinator also sent out the link to the preschool coordinators for indicator 12. Safe Schools report is due June 30th. And basically what that means is you are going to need to go in and review the Safe Schools data. And I'm going to talk about that more in a little while, but you're just going to need to review that for students with disabilities. And then July 31st, special education exiting data. And again, I'll talk about that. But that's due July 31st because some districts ask that we give you time after summer school to clean things up. And then the child count data. The child count data is usually due the Monday after child count. However, December 1st falls on a Friday this year. And I've talked to some people and they have suggested, the problem is we have to pull it on a Monday, but the report runs like the Friday close of business on Friday. So some people have asked that we give you an extra week to get everything put into place, because if you have ARC meetings on Friday, December 1st, and can't get all the paperwork in place by 5 p.m., those students probably won't be included in the report. And so we're talking about moving it out a week, but we're still having those internal discussions, and I'm talking to CJIC about it, and we're having all kinds of conversations about it. So I just want to let you know, I mean, it's still December 1, it's still the date we're looking at, but the day the data are actually going to be pulled, we're not sure what day that's going to be yet. So let's talk about indicators on what, yeah. Okay, Tanya asked who is responsible for submitting indicator 12, the DOS or the preschool coordinator or both. I wouldn't recommend both, but I would recommend that you work together and figure out who's going to submit that. I would say probably the preschool coordinator. In a lot of districts, that's the same person. I would say probably the preschool coordinator, but I think it's going to change in every district. So I wish I could give you a more definitive answer, but I just think it's your decision how that's going to get done. Okay, so let's talk about the indicator 11 and 13 spreadsheet. I sent this out on April 26th, so probably what, 3 weeks ago, maybe? No, 2 weeks ago. And the tabs are the cover sheet, the instructions, the assurances, indicator 11, sample indicator 11, and indicator 13. So those are the tabs. If you've done this before, you're familiar with this. Last year we put indicator 12 in there as well. This year we took indicator 12 out and put it in a survey. We just thought it was easier to collect and it was easier to explain it, and we just thought it was easier to do it that way. Eventually I hope to get indicators 11, 13 as a spreadsheet or as a survey as well, but that's down the road. So indicator 11 is the percent of children who are evaluated within 60 days of receiving parental consent for initial evaluation, or whatever the state time frame is. And Kentucky's time frame is actually 60 school days, which can cause trouble because often that goes across the summer. It goes across school years. And Infinite Campus can't run the report across school years. They can only run it for 1 year at a time. So that's been the issue that we've had, or an issue that we've had with this report. So there is a report called the SPED Evaluation Detail Report that is available for you to use, and we've added quite a bit to it. It's only for your use. We look at it every once in a while, but we will not. We understand that that data is not as clean as we would like it to be. As far as like if students leave or like preschool calendars can be a problem. So if we only use this for reference, but it's really for you to choose your list of 10% of students on the report to put on the report that you submit to us. So this is a SPED evaluation detail report. Go to Kentucky State Reporting, Katie Reports, SPED evaluation detail, and click Generate Report. Now, some things you want to know about this. If the date of consent for initial evaluation says missing consent date, you need to enter the consent date, and that is right here. That's what this looks like. So if it's missing, you're not going to see that in the printed document. That this field does not show up in the printed document. So you're going to have to unlock the document and go in and put this date in. Often it's the same as the ARC date, but not always. So that's what you need to do if it says missing consent date. If you have a consent date, but it says missing eligibility date, but you haven't done the eligibility yet, that's okay. Because it hadn't been done, so it's not expecting a date. So you don't need to worry about that. Some other things you want to know. If a student left the district, I've gotten, I don't know how many emails about this in the last month. If a student leaves the district, that counter is going to keep going. That's just the way it works. But column N says enrollment end date. If there's a date in there, then you can filter the students out. Show you what that looks like. Enrollment end date right here. So you can just click on filter and then just there's nothing in here, so I can't really show you, but you can just filter out anything with a date. Just uncheck it. And then we also, I think it went in today, have a date of revocation of consent for evaluation. So I've gotten this email quite a bit recently too, where if a parent signs the consent form and then says, nah, never mind, I don't want to do it. Then if you put, let me see if I can find this report. Yeah. Oh, this is the new look, but this is in the current look as well. So there is a field called date of revocation of consent for evaluation. If you put that date in here, then that'll show up on this report and you can filter out those students as well. If you don't use that, that's fine. If you don't use this field, but those kids they're gonna show up either way, but you're not gonna have that date there to know. But it doesn't matter to me one way or the other. So if that's not something your district does, it's fine. Preschool days are not accurate. You have to calculate those on your own. I don't know why they're not accurate. Well, I do know why they're not accurate, but basically preschool days need to be counted. Preschool is considered, even if they only meet 2 or 3 days a week, they still need to be counted on a 5-day calendar. But because the calendars are messed up, because the calendars say they only meet 2 days a week, then the counts aren't accurate. Okay, this is new this year, and if you've already submitted your report and didn't do this, I'm okay with that. But going forward, we're going to need to do this. So the way Infinite Campus is set up, it can only, and I mentioned this earlier, it can only run the report for 1 year at a time, 1 school year at a time. So if there were kids that for whom you got a consent at the end of the 21-22 school year. So let's say in April of 2022, you got a consent to evaluate for that student. Well, there's no way you're going to finish that by the end of the school year. Well, there you might, but not if you're out of school on May 1st. So if you, and you have the 60 school days to complete it. So you want to include that student on this report in addition to the students that are on the 22-23 school year. And then at the same time, if there are students, let's say you got consent today for a kid to evaluate, you're not going to be able to complete evaluation for this school year. So you're going to want to include them on the next school year. Am I making any sense? Click on the react button and give me a thumbs up. I'm getting nothing. Did I get a thumbs up or did I get a hand? Somebody raise their hand. I don't know. The react button is right next to the raise hand. Okay. Sort of. I got a sort of. Okay. So I'm going to explain this one more time just to make sure. So you want to include any kids from last school year where you didn't have time to complete, to complete eligibility determination. So you got consent at the end of the school year. There were not 60 school days between the time you got consent until the end of the school year. And this report gives you the school days between consent and eligibility determination, or today if you haven't determined eligibility. But this one is school days between consent and the last instructional day of the year. So this will actually tell you, if you run this for last year, it'll say you had 20 days between the day you got consent and the last day of school. So you'll have that calculated for you. How many should be included from the previous school year? Okay, hold that thought, Lindsay. I'll come back. Because thank you for reminding me of that question. So, so this will say 20. And then, so what you're going to do is take any kids who have a number less than 60 in this one from the previous year. And then, yes, and then add it to the number of kids on this school year. And then you'll choose your 10% from that list. So you're going to create your own list, some from last year, most from this year, and then create your list. I know it's confusing and I wish I could figure out how to make it not confusing, but I have not been successful in doing that. Just include any kids that weren't included last year because you didn't have time to finish it. So you're going to have a list, the ones from last year and the ones from this year, and then you're going to randomly choose 10% of those kids and put those on the indicator 11 and 13 spreadsheet, which I'm trying to pull up right now, but it's not cooperating. I think it doesn't like that I'm presenting and wanting to. Yeah, this is good. I'm hooked up my computer. All right, well, when it pulls up, I'll bring it up. So this is an indicator 11 example of what you're going to put in. So if there were any days over the timeline, if you have 0, then you don't need to fill out any of this. But if there were any days over the timeline, we did take COVID-19 out as a reason. but we want more than just an X or a Y or a whatever. We need just a short explanation of what the reason is. Miranda said she looked at a report from last year and any student. Okay. Yeah, so you want to, thank you. Miranda did a pretty good explanation of in the chat of how she managed this, and that's exactly what I want. So you're not going to include any kids where you obtain consent less than 60 days before the end of the school year for this year. But last year, you're going to include those kids. Is this? There it is. Okay, so one of the questions I've gotten, and I don't know why I didn't think about this before, but number of initial consents, I need to reword this, but this should be the combined list, like the total number of kids who could be on this report. So those who were included from last year and those included from this year, the sum of those two. And that should be here, and then it'll calculate it for you. So if I had 4 students from last year that I got consent for in April, and then I have 8 students from, well, I'll say 38 students from this year, who I've gotten consent for and was able to had enough time to complete the evaluation. And 38 plus 4 is 42, and that's what I want to put here. And it'll calculate the number of students for you right here. Okay. Back to my presentation. So then, yeah, you're just going to put them on the list and you're going to choose a random 10%. I use random.org. I know a lot of people use a lot of different ways. Some say choose every third. If you're going to choose every third, at least try to make sure you're including kids. You're not choosing them all from the same school. Try to spread it out across schools. But there are a lot of different ways to do it. Okay, indicator 13. This one is a little bit different because the compliance record review document changed. So here's the link to the compliance record review. This is only for students ages 16 or older. So I know 1 or 2 of these regulations down here say for kids 14 or older, and I question that as well, but you're still only looking at students 16 or older. So you for this particular indicator. So you don't need to pull 14-year-olds just for the one regulation that, involves 14 and up. It's only for 16-year-olds and up. And again, you're going to get that list. The best way to do it is to use your QA SPED report, or you can use your child count report, but I think QA SPED is probably going to be the more recent list you have. And then just choose a random 10%. No less than 10. If you only have 4 kids 16 or older, or for indicator 11, if you only have 4 kids on your list for initial evaluation, then give me all 4. If you have 1,000 kids who are 16 and older, or 1,000 kids on your indicator 11 list, don't give me more than 50. So it's 10%, no less than 10, no more than 50. And some of you, I realize, don't even have indicator 13 because you might be from a K-8 district, and that's fine too. Just write that on there somewhere. So this is kind of a wrap up. Spreadsheets were emailed out. If you didn't get one, or somebody told me they got one and it didn't have the indicator 11 tab in it. I'm not sure how that happened, but just email me and I'll send it to you. So for indicator 11, you're going to want to use the SPED evaluation detail report. For indicator 13, I would recommend the QA SPED detail report. And then you're going to want to submit that through the dose secure file transfer, please don't email it. It has all kinds of personally identifiable information that we don't want just being emailed. So yeah, that's how you're going to do that. If you don't have access to the dose secure file transfer portal, then you need to make sure your WAPOC, your web applications administrative point of contact, puts you in as the director of special education into the person role manager. And that's the only way you can get access. I can't give it to you. Indicator 12. So this is a compliance indicator. So indicator 11 was all students who had initial evaluation and did it get done within the 60 school days. Indicator 13 was transition for students 16 and older. Did they get all the components put into place in their IEP for secondary transition? Indicator 12 is for preschool. It's for part C, so birth to 3, and the transition to IDEA part B, which is for ages 3 to 21. And so did they have an IEP put into place and implemented by their 3rd birthday? So there are some measurements for this, and I think the survey does a much better job of explaining how to do this. Again, somebody asked me earlier who's responsible for this, and I would recommend that be the preschool coordinator, but that's Amy Patterson talking, not the Part B, not the IDEA data manager saying, hey, you have to do this. So what we're looking at here is the number of children who have been served in Part B and referred to Part B for eligibility determination. So that's kind of the whole. Number of those referred to not be eligible. Number of those found eligible who have an IEP developed and implemented by their 3rd birthday. Number of people whose parents refused, and number of children who were referred fewer than 90 days before their 3rd birthdays. Referred to Part C, not referred by Part C. On the Indicator 13 report, if student tests of SPED services but had an IEP this year, can they be a part of the 10%? Yes. Yes, they can, Wes. Oh, if they test out of special ed services. Yeah. Yeah, if you've determined eligibility, whether it's they are eligible or they're not eligible. Yes, you can, they should be included.
I guess what I mean by that is if we pulled a list and they said they had an IEP through December, and can they still be a part of the 10% even though they're no longer in special education?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't understand that question, but now I do. Yeah. Okay, so we are collecting this data differently than we were for Indicator 12. They were using a Google form, and then last year we used a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet was a mess. We decided there was a better way to do it. So now we're using the survey. It's a Microsoft survey that I think, hopefully, if anybody has done it, clarify for me, but you should be getting a response back that says you've submitted the survey and this is what your answers were. I'm not sure, but that should be happening. If you submit indicators, when you submit the Indicator 11 and 13 spreadsheet, if the system is working properly, you should get an email saying we received it. But a lot of times that goes to junk mail, so you need to check. Now, for this year, and going forward, you need to have the SSIDs of any students who are part of the data collection for indicator 12. You need to have those SSIDs readily available because we're probably going to ask for them. We don't want you to send them. We don't want you to email them to us right now, but we're probably going to ask for them. Just have them available. Okay, personnel and placement. So that's the spreadsheet that I sent to you guys. And I've also sent guidance documents to go with it. It's basically the guidance that we get from the federal government. So we collect data on special education teachers, paraprofessionals, and related service providers who are employed or contracted. And these are the categories, how we collect them. And so we collect preschool and then school age. So preschool is 3 through age 5 and in preschool. And then school age is age 5 in kindergarten through 21. And then we get the full-time equivalent. So you're going to round it to the nearest hundredth of a decimal place. So like a percentage. Like if it's 0.01, that's 1% of the day or 1% of the week or 1% of however you want to do that. Like 1% of their time. And you only want to report the part where they work with students with disabilities. So here's an example, works with students, teacher 1 works with students with disabilities 3 hours out of a 6-hour day. So that would be a half FTE. Teacher 2 works with students with disabilities 4 hours out of a 6-hour day. So that's 0.67. And then you're going to add those together to be 1.17. I realize you may not have exact numbers, just do the best you can, get it as close as you can. The big thing is to make sure you are reporting fully certified and not fully certified, or qualified and not qualified. Make sure you're reporting those accurately and don't get them mixed up, because that's happened quite a bit where people report the numbers for not qualified that are actually the numbers for qualified. Are vacant positions included in this count? No. Dustin, yes, I will send that to you. You might want to, if you don't hear from me by the end of like tomorrow, by like lunchtime tomorrow, send me an email. And I'll be happy to send it to you. And I'll also send you if anybody needs the guidance around it again, I'm happy to send that too. So this is what the personnel report looks like. So for preschool children who are fully certified in special education, put the FTE here. So that would be like the 1.17. For preschool children, that should be teachers. For preschool teachers who are fully certified in special education. For preschool teachers who are not fully certified. And then same thing for grades K through 14. And then we do the same thing for related service providers. Those aren't broken out by preschool and K through 14. And then we have placements. So this is for the private school proportionate amount. So, and this is a little confusing as well. So we need students by age, not grades. So if you have a 5-year-old, they are going to be included in this ages 3 through 5, whether they're in kindergarten or preschool. And then you're going to include all kids in this one, ages 3 through 21. Whoops. And then for this one, the count of students who are enrolled in private, parochial, or home elementary or secondary school. So in homeschool. For this one, you're doing it by grade. Actually, it's all any kids in kindergarten or up. So that's what's going to go in here. So the only thing here, the only kids you're going to put in this column are kindergartners who are 5 years old. I know it's confusing, and I'm sorry. So let's talk about safe schools. Any questions up till this point before I start talking about the hard stuff? Okay. So to run the Safe Schools report, you are going to go to Kentucky State Reporting and then to Safe Schools. This is supposed to be underneath this, but it did not fit. So you're going to click on that. You're going to select Safe Schools. You're not going to select Safe Schools Historical. That is from 2017 and before. So you're going to select Safe Schools. So it's going to look like this. Now, just so you know, there is an extract type of, I think you can do an error report, or the detail report. And then it should select the date range for you. This is an old one, obviously, but if you have the right year selected if you have the right school year selected, it should select the right date range. If you only want to pull students with disabilities, you can check this active special ed at time of incident box, and that'll only give you students with disabilities. So you do need to make sure you have the correct calendar year. If you only want kids with disabilities, select active special ed. If you don't, if you want them all, feel free to run it all. And then you have to highlight whichever schools you're looking at. And then you're going to click run extract. You could click submit to batch, which you'll have to come back later and get it. If you click run extract, once you do that, that'll give you an error report. It'll give you a list of errors. At the top of that, there is a button, and I forgot to do a screenshot for this. There's a button that says generate extract or something along those lines. And that will actually run the report for you, the actual Safe Schools report. So when you click run extract, all you're getting is the error report until you click that extra button at the top. If you click submit to batch, it won't give you the error report. It'll only give you, unless you've selected error report up here, it'll only give you the actual report. So. Okay, so the state resolution. Dana, did you have a question?
No.
Okay. So for the state resolution codes, I'm just showing you all the resolution codes, and you don't have to have these memorized. I'm just showing them to you so you know what they mean. I realize your Safe Schools people are your people, are the people that deal with this the most, but I feel like you need to be aware of it. So there's SSP1 expelled with services. There's SSP2 expelled without services. And you should not use that for a student with an IEP. I had one district that did that this year that called me and talked to me about it. And we're still working on how to code that because they didn't actually expel the service and the kid and say we're not providing services. So, SSP3 is out of school suspension. SSP5 is corporal punishment. SSP7 is physical restraint. SSP8 is seclusion. Now these two, physical restraint is not included as a removal, which is mainly what I look at. So the data that I look at for IDEA is very different from the data that the Safe Schools people look at. We look at the length of removals. How long was a student taken out of the classroom? Because that's what's really important to us. So we look at that. Safe schools people don't. So, but the physical restraint is what we just review that differently because yeah, we want to know how many of our kids are being physically restrained. But we know that it's higher in special ed for lots of reasons. But we don't include that as a removal. Then we have seclusion, in-school removal, in-district removal, and IAES. If you're not familiar with IAES, that's probably another conversation that we need to have sometime. So feel free to call me. In-school removal. I was going to take this out, but I've had some questions about it this year. For IDEA, the IDEA clearly says that non-instructional time, such as lunch, recess, and study periods, are removals from their regular setting. So we include those as removals. INDR, in district removal, if the student is being sent to an off-site location or well, if they're being sent to another school, not their regular school, then that is actually considered an out-of-school removal for IDEA purposes, but it's considered an in-school removal for safe schools purposes because there are funding implications for that, and we don't want you to lose your funding. If you have questions about these, this is a link to the behavior data standards that can help you, or you can always email me. So these are what we look at when it comes to special ed discipline reporting, and there is a misnomer out there that the only thing we care about is out of school greater than 10 days. And that is what indicator 4 is. But that is not the only thing we care about. So we look at in-school removals, and basically we look at the number of kids that were removed less than 10 days, number of kids that were removed greater than 10 days. And then we do the same thing with out-of-school removals, where they removed out of school less than 10 days or greater than 10 days. And this is cumulative time. So if they were removed, one time for 3 days, one time for 5 days, and one time for 7 days, that's going to count as 15 days, even though they were all less than 10. And then count of removal events is combined. It's not the number of days, but how many events were there where the student was removed, in school or out of school. And so what counts as in school or out of school? This is in school removal and seclusion. Out of school is SSP1, SSP2. So any expulsion, any out of school removal, and then an in-district removal. And then IAES, interim alternative educational setting. That has to be, that's typically do I talk about that later? That's typically a unilateral removal by school personnel or a removal by the hearing officer for up to 45 days. But it has to be one of 3 very serious incidents involving drugs, weapons, or serious bodily injury. It has to involve one of those things, or it cannot be considered an IAES. The other thing to note, and you might get an email from me about this, is IAES is only for students with IEPs. So that it's an IDEA exception. So if a student without an IEP is listed as having an IAES, I am going to email you and ask you to reach out to your Safe Schools people and have them fix it. But I think we've gotten most of those taken care of already this year. So how is a student included on the Safe Schools report? The removal length has to be greater than 0. So the removal length is calculated within Infinite Campus. And it's calculated to the nearest 100th of a day. So it'll be 0.01 or higher. in order to be counted. The resolution state code has to be one of these. When we pull a student, if a student is removed, the Safe Schools report, when we report this for federal reporting for IDEA, it actually goes back and compares it to the child count report. So whatever the demographic information for that student was in the child count report, that's what it's going to be. Sometimes students change races, maybe during the school year, maybe when they move from one district to another. It's going to go back to whatever it was on child count. The disability often changes during the school year. Not often, but more often than the race. So again, it's going to go back to whatever it was on child count. Same thing with EL status. We haven't had any genders change yet, but I imagine that's coming. And again, that'll go back to Safe Schools. If the student is not on the child count report, then we use the demographic data from the final record in Safe Schools. So basically, we can't report a kid as being Black and as being white. It messes up our data, it causes errors, and they won't accept it. So we have to make sure that for every incident that that child is reported, that they have the same race, the same gender, the same disability, everything. So we have to keep it consistent. So those are the rules we use. So Corey asked, so no restraint on Safe Schools should say 0. No, it's okay for them to say 0. I'm just not going to include them if they say 0. So I would hope the restraint would be as short as possible. So that's perfectly fine. Now there were some of you where I went through the Safe Schools report last week and I saw a bunch of zeros and it looked like the kid had actually, sometimes the removal is only like a minute and a half. And that's probably going to be a 0 length, and that's fine. But if it looked like the student was removed from 8 to 3 and it was a 0 length, inevitably that is because that was a non-instructional day. Maybe somebody just put in the wrong date. Maybe they were suspended for tomorrow and tomorrow ends up being a snow day, whatever. So you have to go in and change the date. And so I emailed several of you and said, hey, can you have somebody go in and change this? Sometimes they put in the wrong year and it's for next year. So removals are calculated. So for the in-school and out-of-school, well, for all kids, they have to be cumulatively removed a total of a half day or more. So if it's a half day, they are included. Every removal that is a 1/10 of a day or longer is going to be included. For the unduplicated counts of students, so for any of these first 4, in-school removals up to 10 days greater, out of school up to 10 days greater. Just literally going to take the sum of the lengths. Now, if a student was removed 5 days in school and 7 days out of school, they're going to be counted in both categories. So they wouldn't combine to be 12 days for those purposes. They would be separate. But for the total removals, if the student was cumulatively, that's a very hard word to say, cumulatively removed greater than half a day or more, then we count every single removal that was involved in that the student was removed. And that is a combination of in-school and out of school. So how can you look at this data? It's pretty complicated, and it is. First thing I want you to know is you have some data visualizations available to you. So in Infinite Campus, you can go in and up at the top, it should say something like Tableau data visualization. And you should be able to click on that and see it. And it should give you visualizations. And I think I have a screenshot of this later. So you can see each student who was removed and the length of time. For the smaller districts, that might be fine for you to be the only one that looks at it. For the larger districts, I would seriously recommend that you have each school look at it, because what we see a lot of times is duplicate entries. So maybe the teacher put it in and the assistant principal put it in, or whatever. So they're duplicate entries. And so that student may have been removed for 5 days, but it was put in twice. So it says they were removed for 10 days. And that's not okay. That's not good for you. So I would have each school take a look at that and see. So you can use the data visualization, or you can just look at the report, sort it by kid, and review it that way, whatever you think is easiest. And again, you're looking at the IEP at the time of the incident. So if the incident occurred on May 11th at 2:27, did they have an IEP at that time? If they had an IEP on December 1, but it ended in January, they're not going to be considered a kid with an IEP for this particular incident. But if they do have an IEP now, even if they weren't on job count, they're going to be considered a kid with an IEP for this particular incident. And then once you've reviewed that data, you're going to click on the survey and you're just going to sign off saying, yeah, I've reviewed this. To the best of my knowledge, this is accurate. So here's some information about data visualizations. Here's the link. There are very limited licenses. A lot of times I hear, we can't give you a license for that because the state said no. Well, I am telling you that OCO, Office of Special Education and Early Learning, paid for this visualization for discipline. So I would like for you to use it and have access to it because it's created for you. The one you want to look at, the one that I recommend most is, I think it's like length of time removed or length of days removed. I think it's days removed. That's the one you want to look at because that'll tell you if a kid, and it also help you with your manifestation determination decisions. Are we getting close? Are we, how many more days can we remove this kid before we need to do one, or are we over, or whatever? Okay, so what kinds of things are you going to look at? Do events for students in evaluation, but no IEP. Right. Yeah, right. So events for students, well, okay. So the question is, do events for students in evaluation with no IEP count for total removals? You got to be careful with that one because there's still the basis of knowledge. So that student in evaluation is still protected under the IDEA. So I think probably if you have questions about that, we probably need to have a conversation with our maybe our monitoring team to make sure you're not, make sure you're doing everything by the law. So you want to look for long restraints, long suspensions. I have seen a lot of, and I'm just making you aware of this because we're going to be checking into it. A lot of suspensions, in-school suspensions that are 150 days. I mean, it's possible that's okay, but it just seems like there are a lot of them. There are hundreds of them. So, we just need to be aware that make sure you are doing everything the way it needs to be done. Make sure you're doing the manifestation determination when it needs to be done and all that. Long restraints. I saw a restraint one time, actually several times, that was 360 days long. whoever did that restraint was really tired by the time they got done. But I'm pretty sure it was more just they put in the wrong date. So you want to look for that kind of stuff. It's red flags. Something that's a little harder to find is overlapping or duplicate resolutions. So what I see a lot is, okay, I've given this student an in-school suspension for 10 days. 2 days in, he got in trouble and he got an out-of-school suspension for 3 days. And he came back for 2 days and then got another out-of-school suspension for a day. So the way that's showing up in the report is 10 days for in-school suspension and 4 days for out-of-school suspension. So it looks like he was removed for 14 days. But really, it was just 10. It's just that some of those were in school and some were out of school. So you want to look for that kind of thing. Again, this is why you want to have your school look at it, because they know their kids probably better than you do at the district level. And again, duplicate resolutions. And I get this question all the time, what is unreasonable data? Well, if a student was restrained, for 3 days, that's probably not reasonable. If a student was expelled for a day, I see that a lot too. They got an expulsion, but it was only for one day and they were back at school the next. That's not really an expulsion. So those sorts of things you want to look for. I can't really define reasonable. You know your kids, you know your situation. But you have to think about it. Remember that for every single line in Safe Schools, there's a kid tied to that. So you want to think about how this is being handled. Count of days removed. So this is it, count of days removed. So this is one of the Tableau visualizations. And what this will do is it'll show you, okay, this kid had an alternative placement for 10 days. INSR, that really should be an INDR, an in-district removal. So that's something to pay attention to that I notice. And then he had an out-of-school suspension for 8.8 days. So he was removed a total of 18.8 days. And so these are, this just gives you a visualization so you can look at it and see which ones are greater than that 10 days. Some things over here on the right that you can take a look at. And these filters are available in all of these visualizations. You've got total days removed at the bottom, or there's some kind of a count down here, whether it's total events, total days removed, whatever. So that's a filter. You can change that to 0. You can change it to 10, whatever you want to do. You want to change, I think, the state and local, that should say Safe Schools, so it matches what we have. You can look for only kids in special ed. You can change this drop down to Y for yes, and only include kids in special ed. You can change and only look at students with a certain disability, or with a certain resolution code, or a certain race. So all of these are available to you to make changes and to review the data. There are a lot of other really cool views for this, things like where did these things occur? Where are the most behavior events occurring? Where I'm trying to think what else. Who is giving the most referrals? Those sorts of things. So some other information about behavior reporting. All resolutions of INSR and INDR will be included in the Safe Schools report. Sometimes other things are included in the Safe Schools report that may be something like called parent, or anything dealing with a weapon or drug or bullying will be in Safe Schools report. If you only want to look at these state resolutions. So a lot of times you'll see a blank state resolution, I don't look at those. I don't use those at all. School report card aggregates INSR and INDR and reports them as an in-school suspension. IAES. It'll be IAES 1 or IAES 2. IAES 1 is unilateral removal, which means basically an administrator said, we need to get him out of here. This is an emergency. We need him out. And he can remove him up to 45 days, but you still have to, the ARC has to meet and decide where that placement's going to be and all those sorts of things. IAES 2 is removal by a hearing officer. That is a hearing officer. That is not the school resource officer. I see that a lot. So things to think about. Okay, that was a lot about safe schools, but I've gotten a lot of questions about it. So do you have questions? Okay. Exiting. The exit report is still going to be the same. But we've added an extra report that you can look at. And it's called the SPED Exit Detail Report. And we have information on this in the processes data standard, especially around students on the alternate assessment. We have some information in the processes data standard that you can look at. And when you go to, after you've reviewed your exiting data, you're going to have to verify it here at this report, at this survey. So to be included on the report, the student must be age 14 to 21. So it's only for high school, well, for 14 to 21, on the December 1 prior to exiting. So this, if the student exited in November, it actually looks back at the prior December 1, which is a little bit annoying because it's a little confusing, but that's the way it works. So they had to be 14 years old. So if they're 14 when they exit, but they were 13 on the previous December 1, they won't be on that report. The students have to be enrolled on or before October 1st. This used to be, until this year, they had to be enrolled on the first day of school in your district, but we've changed it to be on or before October 1st. And then I'll show you what this means, but within the enrollment tab, there's the special ed fields. And within those special ed fields, we have the special ed exit status and the special ed exit date. Those are what we are reporting. So if a student exits, if a student ages 14 to 21, and most districts do all, if a student with an IEP exits, you need to go in and put in the reason, and it's going to be one of 7 reasons: transferred to regular education, graduated, got an alternate diploma, aged out, dropped out, reached maximum age, so turned 21, and moved on to continue. Those are the 7 reasons. If a student leaves, you need to put in one of those 7 statuses and then put in the date that they exited. And all this is in the data processes standards and also in the special ed exiting report. Now, something I want to show you about this. Let's see if I can find it here. So this is a new report we have this year, and that's the one that I just pointed you to. This report has a ton of information, and I am most likely going to be doing a training just on this. And by the way, these are not real SSIDs, so nobody freak out. What this report does is it gives you a ton of information about students, but what you need to be worried about the most is any student who possibly could have exited is going to be on as ages 14 to 21 who possibly could have exited will be on this report. Some things you need to watch out for. if there is no disability, it'll highlight it yellow. Then you need to go back and figure out why there's no disability. If the student is listed as having an IEP, but for some reason the disability isn't there, you need to go back in and research that. So, and it'll highlight it yellow for you. SPED exit status on enrollment. So those were the SPED exit statuses that I was just talking about, the special ed exit status. If these are blank, but this has something in it, the KDE determined exit status, you need to put in move known to continue for the student if it's appropriate. Sometimes KDE's logic may not be right, but I would say it's right most of the time, because we have spent 3 years reviewing this report. So you're going to have to go back in and highlight and put in the special ed exit status. It may or may not be moved on to continue. You probably want to research it just to make sure. Probably will be. Same thing here. Same thing with the special ed exit date. So if this says the kid moved on 3/1/23 and they were moved known to continue, then you need to put in that date. Couple of other important things you want to look at. I think if this has a Y in it, you need to review the kid. So you can filter and only select Y. And then this will show you all the kids that need to be enrolled. Now, if you run it right now and school's still in session, you're going to get active enrollment some. So that's okay because it's still active. So those kids you can't really do anything with probably. The other thing you want to look at is state final enrollment. If you change the state final enrollment to a Y, then things that might be concerning to you. If it says move known to continue and the state final enrollment is a Y, it's possible that the kid was a dropout. Now, if he moved out of state or went to homeschool, in this case, he transferred to homeschool, that's fine. It's going to be yellow, but that's okay. So you can just like create your own column over here and say, okay. But if it says move known to continue and he enrolled somewhere in another district, then he's not, or I'm sorry, he didn't enroll anywhere else in another district and he's not moved known to continue, he's going to be a dropout. These blank highlighted fields, will they show up on the error report? Yes, they show up on the error report. I am very thankful for our the technology that they put into this. It's going to help you guys a lot. And I think what I might do is probably just create office hours just around the exit report, because there's a lot of information here and a lot of really good information, and it's coming out late. It's been two and a half years in the making. So anyway. So yeah, these will be highlighted. So the other one we've seen is deceased here for the KDE determined status. And the state final enrollment was a no. So the student enrolled somewhere else after they died. So that was probably an error and you probably just missed. I know in drop down, sometimes you can just miss. So those are just things that can help you. And if you go into the report, let's see. If you go into the report, there's some more information on it. So right here, that's the wrong one. Sorry. There it is, SPED exit detail report. So here's some information on it, but that if you click in, and this is available in a lot of reports that we have, the quick reference card, it gives information about how to use this report. So some things you want to look at, some reporting uses. Now, the one thing I want to caution about this report is it might be highlighted and be completely accurate, like this kid that moved to homeschool. And it said moved on to continue. That's fine. If they moved out of state, that's fine. But it's just to make you aware, we might want to look at this. So, um, so yeah, so this will tell you who's on your exit report. Another thing that I need to remind you of is at the end of the school year, make sure you go into the special ed fields and mark that those students graduated, those who graduated, make sure that you mark that they graduated in the special ed exit status and special ed exit date. Because I have had entire districts not show up because they didn't have any graduates. And when you are getting graduation is currently on the determinations for your district. So you want to make sure your graduates count. That's big. And that's why we reported this or created this report for you so that you can have that information available to you. Okay, now for the fun stuff. There's some changes in the Infinite Campus special ed reports, documents. And so currently Infinite Campus calls the current look 4.0. I don't know why, that's just what they call it. The new look is called Elements. And eventually they're going statewide. All of Infinite Campus is going to have a whole new look, but that's years down the road. But guess what? They're starting with special ed forms. Aren't we lucky? So I just want to give you an idea of what to expect. And is Matt on here? I don't know if he's on here. Okay. Matt Coffey has done a lot of work around this. Okay, so we talked about elements. So for every CERTAC or co-op and every early learning regional training center, each of them has a person, a representative on our special education advisory group for Infinite Campus, also known as CEGIC. And they have been meeting a couple of times a month, sometimes more, with Infinite Campus and with us at K2E to talk through the changes that are coming up. So and it's now in a format that we can actually go in and test it out and everything. So we'll be doing that next week probably. So what's not changing? There are no changes to the printed documents. The printed documents are going to stay the same, except for a few minor changes like in wording. There were some things like grammar changes and that kind of stuff. We are not removing any data entry validations. We are adding a few, but we're making sure that they are appropriate. There's going to be a new look for the data entry screens for each of the editors. All checkboxes that used to say yes or no are now drop downs. It takes up less screen space. And each document will have a landing page. And for each of those landing pages, there are what they call status pills. And I'll show you what that looks like. That say not started, or in progress, or completed, or not needed. So you can mark something not needed. So for example, if you're doing an ARC with a third grader, and there is in the IEP, there's a editor for secondary transition. Well, you don't need to worry about that right now. So you just mark it not needed and you're good. All editors have to be marked completed or not needed before a document can be locked. So we still have the locking. Buttons are actually at the bottom of the screen, not at the top of the screen. And then required fields have an asterisk instead of red text because there was some concern about the accessibility of the red text. So these are all the documents that we have that have had changes made to them. And I think the private school service plan is also probably included with this IEP. So this is what a landing page looks like. So this is the landing page for the referral. So each of these is an editor. And so it's marked in progress and who last modified it. So that's what this looks like. And I really like this look. It's going to take some getting used to, like just navigating, but once you've done it once or twice, it's pretty easy. But I think this is really going to help. The other thing, well, I'll show you in a minute, but the other thing this does is will tell you if somebody else is working in the document. And then this is what the editor itself looks like. So if you click this like little arrow down here, the blue by save, it will say save and next, or save and stay. So you can save it and it'll stay where you are, or it will move on to the next editor. Then this drop down says complete, not needed, or I guess that's it, complete or not needed, or in progress, the print button is down here at the bottom. The editor, so if you click on this editor, it'll open up a page on the right that shows all of the editors for this document. So all of the editors that are shown here. And then there's the previous and next button. So one thing I really like about this, because I have certain people that complain about this a lot, and that is that only one user can actively work on an editor. So what I hear is two people were working in the same editor. They put in all these notes and then they lost their work because somebody else was in it at the same time and they had access and the other person didn't know they were in there. So what this will do is it'll show a little padlock icon. This is what it looks like. It's going to show on the editor side panel. So when you go there, you can see it in read only, but you can't make changes. So, and if you hover over it, it'll tell who the editor, who's working on it. So if you need them to get out, you can email them and say, hey, we got something going on here. I need to get in. Yeah, so editors that are currently being edited are read only. Okay, so around these changes, I know that changes can be, well, change is always scary, right? So I'm going to make sure I provide as much guidance as I possibly can. We are working on updating the data standards now, so you'll have screenshots and you'll see what it looks like. We will have, our plan is to have videos for each of the documents available like prior to mid-June when the release is scheduled for. We're going to do, I'll be at Kentucky Case, the conference in July. I'll be doing a training on that, about an hour and a half long training. And then I'll be doing a couple of trainings in August, like when school first starts, for people. And you can even invite teachers to that if you want. And I'll be doing open office hours. So basically, and I'll let you know what that looks like as we get closer to the beginning of the school year. But basically, I'll just make myself available. So if you have questions, if anybody's panicking about anything, if there are issues that, because I'll be honest with you, I know issues happen. I'm not expecting the same issues we had 7 years ago when we went through this process, or 8 years ago, whenever that was. for those of you who were around. But I know things happen. And so I want to know when things are happening so I can help you work through them and work with Infinite Campus to work through them. So I just want you to know I'm here. Okay, and that took every bit of an hour and a half. Well, I have 4 minutes left. Y'all have any questions, comments, concerns? For ELA credit, let me see if I can. There's a form you need to go to, which is right here. The editor changes are set to go live mid-June. Right now, they're saying June 14th, but I usually take that date with a grain of salt. And when will this go live, and will there be a sandbox time period? Unfortunately, if you have only a few districts have access to, excuse me, to a staging site, like maybe a handful. And I mean, that just went live today in the staging sites, but not many districts have access to that. So unfortunately, no, there won't be a sandbox time period. But I'm hoping we can work through all the bugs for you. That's my hope. So to get ELA credit, just click on that form, answer the questions. It should, if it doesn't send you a certificate, let me know. But it should, I hope. I tested it out yesterday and it worked. So thank you guys for your time. I know this is a crazy busy time for you all. So I appreciate it. And I'll make this training available, or this video available probably late Friday or early Monday. Thanks. I'll stick around in case anybody has questions.